Today we'll be exploring the world of Kabir.
Kabir.
Yeah, a 15th century Indian mystic poet
Mm-hmm.
whose work continues to resonate with readers even centuries later.
Yeah.
We've got a selection of his poems translated by Rabindranath Tagore,
Okay.
which is fascinating in itself because it gives us a glimpse
Right.
into how these poems were passed down
Mm-hmm.
orally for generations before being written down.
Yeah.
What we're after today is the essence of Kabir's poetry,
Right.
what makes his work so powerful
Okay.
and relevant to us today.
That oral tradition is a really key part of appreciating Kabir.
Yeah.
He was a weaver,
Okay.
not a scholar,
Interesting.
in the traditional sense. His poems use the language of everyday life to communicate deep spiritual truths.
So how does this weaver become a renowned spiritual figure?
Yeah.
What was his background?
Kabir was born in Benares around 1440
Okay.
to Muslim parents,
Okay.
yet became a disciple of a Hindu ascetic named Ramananda.
Wow. So a real blend there.
It's this blend of influences that really shapes his poetry.
Right.
His work becomes this fusion of Hindu and Islamic mystical ideas, ultimately searching for a universal spirituality that goes beyond any single religion.
So he's not bound by the typical labels
Right.
of Hindu poet or Islamic poet.
Exactly.
He's forging his own path.
Forging his own path, exactly.
And the fact that he was a weaver
Yeah,
adds another layer to this.
it does.
His mysticism wasn't about escaping the everyday world. It was about finding the divine within it,
Exactly.
in the midst of ordinary life.
Mm,
That makes his work feel much more relatable.
Yeah.
Instead of some far-off mystical concept.
right.
It's about finding the divine in the everyday,
Right.
right here and now.
Right here, right now.
So what are some of the core themes
Yeah.
that run through Kabir's poetry?
One of the things that makes Kabir so fascinating, even centuries later, is this central idea.
Okay.
God is everywhere and accessible to all.
Not just in temples or mosques or through complicated rituals.
I'm reminded of that line from one of his poems where he says,
Mhm.
I am neither in temple nor in mosque. If thou art a true seeker,
Right.
thou shalt at once see me.
It's powerful.
Oh, powerful statement.
It really is.
Yeah.
Kabir is shattering the need
Mm-hmm.
for elaborate rituals, scriptures,
Yeah.
or intermediaries.
Okay.
He's saying that God can be found in direct experience,
Mm-hmm.
open to everyone,
Okay.
regardless of their background.
And that was pretty radical for his time.
This was pretty radical.
Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
To suggest that you didn't need a priest or a specific religious structure to find God.
Yeah, to suggest that you didn't need any of that stuff
Absolutely.
to find God.
Must have been quite a challenge
It was a challenge.
to the established religious structures of his day.
Oh, absolutely.
And I see that same radical inclusivity
Yeah.
in the characters he uses in his poems.
The barber, the washerwoman, the
Yep.
carpenter,
Right.
everyday people experiencing the divine.
It's like he's democratizing spirituality. And this ties into another key idea in his work.
Okay.
The idea that all the labels and categories we create are just words,
Right.
creating artificial divisions, when in reality, everything is connected.
I think of that line.
Yeah.
The distinction of the conditioned from the unconditioned is but a word.
Right.
That feels like a really complex idea.
It is.
How would you explain that
Yeah.
to someone who's encountering Kabir for the first time?
It's about seeing beyond the illusion of separateness.
Okay.
Kabir is saying we get so caught up in labels like this versus that, us versus them,
Yeah.
conditioned versus unconditioned.
Yeah.
But it's all part of one unified reality.
Okay.
Our perception is what creates the separation.
So it's about recognizing that underlying unity,
Yes,
that interconnectedness of everything. It's about shifting our perception.
precisely.
And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of Kabir's poetry. His unique vision of God.
Yes.
It's not a simple, straightforward concept.
Yes.
It's a paradox.
It is.
This is where I think it gets really interesting.
Right.
His view of God is so different
It is.
from traditional religious ideas.
What makes Kabir's vision so unique is what we call a synthetic vision.
Okay.
He saw God as both personal and impersonal, both immanent in the world and transcendent beyond it.
So how can God be both of those things at the same time?
Yeah.
It seems like a contradiction.
It is, and Kabir embraces that paradox.
Right.
He uses different images and metaphors to try and capture this multifaceted reality.
Okay.
Sometimes he speaks of God as the beloved fakir,
Mm-hmm.
a personal God you can have a relationship with,
Right.
someone who guides and accompanies you on your journey.
Okay.
Then in other poems, he describes God as the mind within the mind, suggesting a universal presence that dwells within all beings.
It's like he's using different lenses
Exactly.
to look at the same divine reality.
Exactly.
And sometimes he even moves beyond any specific concept,
right.
acknowledging that words ultimately fail to grasp the fullness of God.
They do.
Like in that line,
Yeah.
beyond both the limited and the limitless, is
Right.
he's pointing to an experience
He is.
that defies definition.
Yeah.
So it's about that direct experience,
It is.
that feeling of connection that goes beyond words.
Mm-hmm.
If we think about Kabir's view of God,
Right.
and this idea that God is everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
how does that then shape how he views the world itself?
Okay.
What's the world's purpose in this grand scheme?
For Kabir, the world is God's Leela,
Okay.
divine play.
Leela, divine play.
This idea comes from Hindu thought,
Okay.
but he doesn't use it lightly.
So it's not just frivolous play.
It's not just frivolous.
It has a deeper meaning.
It has a deeper meaning.
Exactly.
Leela means that creation is an overflowing of God's joy and love,
Mm-hmm.
a spontaneous and joyful expression of the divine.
And this isn't some stuffy theological concept.
It's not.
Think about the imagery Kabir uses.
Right.
Dance, music,
Yeah.
a vibrant, dynamic expression.
Mm-hmm.
There's that striking image
Yes.
of the eternal swing of the universe,
Yeah.
which is held by the chords of love.
A powerful image.
It really captures that sense of joyful movement.
Yes, and it's a theme we see throughout his work.
Mm-hmm.
There's this sense that the universe is a symphony, a dance,
Right.
this incredible expression of divine love and energy.
So it's not just that there's music in the universe,
Right.
but that the universe itself is music.
The universe itself is music, exactly.
We'll definitely have to come back to that idea later.
Okay.
But for now, I'm curious.
Mm-hmm.
With all this talk of God's love and play,
Right.
where does that leave us humans?
Okay.
What role do we play in all of this?
Kabir was very clear that the key to connecting with the divine isn't through elaborate rituals
Right.
or intellectual understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's through love. Love. It's simple.
And you really feel that longing for connection in his poetry.
You do.
There's a rawness,
Right.
an emotional depth to it.
There is.
And it's interesting because alongside that,
yeah.
he's also pretty critical
Mm-hmm.
of those who focus on outward displays of piety.
He is.
He constantly emphasizes inner experience over outward show.
He does.
Like when he talks about the yogi who looks like a goat,
Right.
but hasn't achieved any real inner transformation.
He hasn't done the work.
He's really challenging us to go beyond
He is.
superficial religious practices
Yes.
and cultivate a genuine connection with the divine within.
Exactly.
And he even goes so far as to criticize idolatry,
Mm-hmm.
reminding his listeners that you won't find God just in a mosque or temple.
You won't.
It's all about that inner sanctuary.
Mm.
So if it's all about inner experience,
Mhm.
does that mean we're on our own
Okay.
in this spiritual journey?
Interesting question.
Or is there some kind of guidance we can seek out?
That brings up the important question of the guru,
The guru.
the spiritual teacher.
Okay.
Kabir acknowledges the importance of having a guru
Hmm.
who can guide you towards that inner experience.
Okay.
But he's also careful to point out
Mm-hmm.
that the guru doesn't have to be a person in the traditional sense.
So it could be a book, a
Yeah.
teaching,
It could.
even a moment of sudden insight.
It could be.
Exactly.
The true guru,
Mm-hmm.
for Kabir,
Yeah.
is something that awakens you to the truth that's already within you.
Mhm.
It's about finding that spark of the divine that's
Mhm.
already present in each of us.
Yes.
That makes me think about those moments in my own life
Right.
where I felt a sudden sense of clarity or connection.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was while reading a particular book
Uh-huh.
or being out in nature
Yeah.
or even just a random conversation with someone.
Right. Those moments where something clicks
Mm-hmm.
and you feel a deeper sense of understanding.
Yeah.
Do you think those moments could be seen as encounters with the guru,
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
even if it wasn't a formal teacher-student relationship?
Those moments where we have a glimpse of that deeper truth,
Right.
that connection with something greater than ourselves,
Yeah.
those are precious opportunities for awakening.
That's a really powerful thought.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, I
Okay.
want to pause here for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
What are your initial reactions to Kabir's ideas so far?
Yeah.
What's resonating with you?
Well, one of the things that strikes me about Kabir's work is how he manages to be both simple and profound.
Yeah.
His poems are rooted in the everyday,
Right.
yet they offer such deep spiritual insights.
Yes, he's not afraid to get down to earth.
Oh.
He talks about weaving, farming,
Yeah.
even the body's functions
Right.
as metaphors for the divine.
Yeah.
I've never encountered a poet who could talk about God and digestion in the same breath.
I know, it's amazing.
It's refreshing.
It is.
And he's also incredibly comfortable with paradox.
Yes, he is.
We've already talked about how he saw God as both personal and impersonal.
Mm-hmm.
And this weaving together of opposites is everywhere in his poetry.
Is.
It reflects the messy, complex reality
That is
of spiritual experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't try to simplify things
No.
or fit them into neat little boxes.
Right.
It's like he's saying, look, life, spirituality,
Yeah.
none of it is always clear-cut.
Yeah.
It's full of contradictions.
It is.
I think that's one of the
I
reasons
think so too.
why his poetry still feels so alive,
Mhm.
so relevant,
Yeah.
even centuries later.
Yeah.
It speaks to a universal human yearning
Right.
for something more,
Mm-hmm.
a search for meaning and purpose that goes beyond
Yeah.
any specific time or place.
Mm.
And makes you wonder what Kabir would have made of our world today.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're bombarded with information, conflicting ideologies,
Yeah.
this constant sense of busyness.
It's hard to unplug.
It can feel impossible to find a moment of peace,
Yeah.
a sense of grounding
Right.
in many ways.
Yeah.
Kabir's poetry is even more relevant today
Okay.
because it speaks to that yearning for simplicity, for connection
Yeah.
in the midst of all the chaos.
So you're saying that Kabir's message of seeking the divine within,
I am.
of finding unity amidst all the diversity,
Mm-hmm.
is almost like an antidote
It's like an antidote.
to the overwhelming nature of modern life.
I think so.
It's a reminder that the divine isn't some far-off concept.
Mm-hmm.
It's right here
Yeah.
within us and all around us.
All around us.
If we just take the time to look.
If we just take the time to
But
look.
the path to that realization
Yeah.
doesn't have to be complicated.
It doesn't.
It's about turning inward,
Right.
cultivating inner peace,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that interconnectedness.
Exactly.
So much of what Kabir talks about
Mm-hmm.
seems to be about shifting our perception,
Yeah.
about seeing the world through a different lens.
It is.
Let's say someone is listening to this
Right.
and they're really intrigued by Kabir's ideas.
Uh-huh.
Where would you recommend they start?
Oh, that's a good question.
What's a good entry point into his work?
The beauty of Kabir is that you can really start anywhere.
Yeah.
But if someone is brand new to his poetry,
Mm-hmm.
I often suggest starting with some of his poems that talk about the accessibility of God, the one we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I am neither in temple nor in mosque
Right?
is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful and direct challenge
Right.
to the idea that you need to go through some specific institution or practice to find God.
Right. And there's another poem where he lists all these different everyday people,
Oh, yeah.
barbers, washerwomen, carpenters,
Right.
as examples of those who can experience the divine. It's a beautifully inclusive message.
It is.
Those poems lay the foundation for Kabir's whole worldview,
Mm-hmm.
and they're a great way to start exploring his work.
Yeah. Exactly.
They invite us to look beyond the surface,
Mm-hmm.
to see the divine spark in everyone and everything,
Yeah.
even the most mundane.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying, don't overcomplicate things.
Right.
Be present, be open,
Yeah.
and you'll find God right where you are.
You will.
It's such a simple yet profound message.
It is.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Kabir saw the universe itself as music,
Yes.
as unstruck music.
Unstruck music.
I'd love to dive into that a bit more,
Okay.
because it's an idea that has really captured my imagination.
It's one of the most captivating and challenging aspects of Kabir's work.
Yeah.
He was a musician himself,
Sure.
and his poetry is full of references to music,
Mm-hmm.
to flutes and harps,
Right.
singing and dancing.
I love the image of the human body as a lyre,
Mm-hmm.
upon which drama, the source of all creation.
Yeah.
It speaks to that interconnectedness of all things.
It does.
We're not just observers of the universe.
Mhm.
We're part of it.
Right.
We're part of this grand orchestra.
We are.
And the music he describes
Yeah.
is something that goes beyond what we can hear with our physical ears.
Right.
It's something you feel,
Yeah.
something you experience with your whole being.
With your whole being.
He writes about this white music blossoming at the heart of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests that creation itself is a kind of symphony,
Yeah.
a constant expression of the divine.
It is.
It's a shift in perspective.
It is.
Instead of just hearing music in the world,
Right.
it's about realizing that the world itself is music.
The world itself is music, precisely.
And for Kabir,
yeah.
that music wasn't just something pleasant to listen to.
No.
It was a path to spiritual awakening.
It was.
Tuning into that unstruck music
Mm-hmm.
was about connecting to a deeper reality,
Yep.
to a realm beyond the physical.
To a realm beyond the physical.
It reminds me of those moments when you hear a piece of music that moves you deeply.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the sound.
Right.
It's about feeling a connection
Yeah.
to something larger than yourself.
To something larger than yourself.
Like you've tapped into a universal frequency.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And I think that's what Kabir is pointing us toward.
I think so too.
To cultivate that kind of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
that sensitivity to the unseen world, that receptivity to the music.
Yeah.
That's always playing
Mm-hmm.
beneath the surface of things.
Beneath the surface of things.
So it's about listening with more than just our ears.
Yes.
It's about listening with our hearts,
Right.
with our souls.
Yes.
It's about being open
Mm-hmm.
to a different way of experiencing the world.
It is.
It makes me think about those times when you walk into a forest
Right.
and you can almost feel the energy of the trees,
Mm-hmm.
the hum of life all around you. Or when you look up at a starry sky and feel a sense of awe and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Are those glimpses of that unstruck music that Kabir is talking about?
They could very well be.
Those moments where we feel a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves,
Yes.
where the boundaries between us and the world seem to dissolve.
Yeah.
Those are moments of profound insight.
They are.
It's like we're catching a glimpse of that divine symphony
Mm-hmm.
that's always playing if we just know how to listen.
Exactly.
And I think Kabir's poetry gives us a language,
Mm-hmm.
a framework for understanding those experiences.
It certainly does.
And it encourages us to cultivate that kind of awareness in our everyday lives.
It does.
To listen for the music of the spheres, the rhythm of the cosmos,
Right.
the heartbeat of the divine
Yeah.
that's pulsating within us and all of creation.
Beautiful.
So it's not just about reading his poetry.
It's not.
It's about embodying that awareness.
Right?
About living with an open heart
Mm.
and a willingness to listen to that subtle music.
Yes.
And that brings up another interesting aspect of Kabir's work that we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
He was pretty critical of organized religion and dogma.
He was.
It seems like he was walking a fine line,
Yeah.
promoting a spiritual path,
Mm-hmm.
while also critiquing the institutions that often claim to offer that path.
You're right. It's a fascinating tension in his work.
Yeah,
We have to remember the historical context.
right.
Kabir lived in a time and place where religious tensions were high.
Mm-hmm.
He saw the dangers of dogma and blind adherence to rituals,
Yeah.
and he wasn't afraid to call it out.
Yeah, he was definitely a rebel in that sense.
He was.
He wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo,
No, he wasn't.
and his critique wasn't just aimed at one religion.
Right.
Remember, he was born Muslim
Mm-hmm.
and became a disciple of a Hindu guru.
Yeah.
He saw hypocrisy and corruption in both traditions,
Mm-hmm.
and he challenged those systems.
Urging people to return to a more genuine and heartfelt spirituality.
He wasn't just offering blind criticism, though.
No.
He was offering an alternative.
He was.
He was saying, look,
Yeah.
there's another way to experience the divine,
Mm-hmm.
a more direct and authentic way.
A more direct and authentic way. Exactly.
Exactly.
He wasn't saying throw out all religion,
Right.
throw out all tradition.
Yeah.
He was saying let's go back to the essence,
Mm.
to the heart of what spirituality is really about.
Okay.
Love, compassion, connection.
I'm thinking of those lines where he talks about
Mm-hmm.
people worshiping a stone
Mm-hmm.
while the divine is right there with them.
Right there with them.
And that image of the yogi who looks like a goat
Mm-hmm.
but lacks inner transformation.
Yeah. He's all shown.
Those are sharp critiques,
They are?
but they're also powerful reminders
Mm-hmm.
to not get caught up in the externals.
Not get caught up in the externals.
He's reminding us
Yeah.
that the true measure of our spirituality
Yeah.
is not how many rituals we perform
Right.
or how outwardly pious we appear.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we live our lives,
Yes.
how we treat others,
Yeah.
and how we cultivate that inner connection with the divine.
Yes.
It's a message that seems particularly relevant today,
I think so.
When we see so much conflict and division
Mm-hmm.
arising from religious differences,
Yeah.
maybe it's not about which religion is right or wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but about finding that common thread
Yeah.
of love and compassion
Exact.
that runs through all spiritual traditions.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
And I think that's ultimately what Kabir is inviting us to do,
I agree.
to move beyond dogma and blind faith,
Mm-hmm.
to question authority,
Yeah.
to seek truth from within,
Right.
and to recognize the shared humanity that binds us all.
Yes, to recognize that shared humanity.
So it's about discerning for ourselves what feels authentic,
Mm-hmm.
what resonates with our own inner experience.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between tradition and individual exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lifelong journey, isn't it?
It is.
A constant process of seeking and questioning
Yeah.
and refining our understanding of the divine.
Absolutely.
And in a world that often feels like it's trying to tell us who we are and what to believe.
Right.
I think that's a powerful and necessary message.
I think so too.
It feels like Kabir is giving us permission to question,
He is.
to explore,
Mm-hmm.
to find our own truth.
To find our own truth.
And I think that's a gift,
It is.
especially in a world that often pressures us to conform.
Right.
But before we wrap up this incredible deep dive into his world,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Right.
That line about the divine music.
Mm-hmm.
Being played without fingers, it is heard without ears.
What a line.
What do you think Kabir meant by that?
It's a great question.
How can something be heard without ears?
It's such a beautiful and evocative image, isn't it? I think Kabir is pointing to a kind of perception
Okay.
that goes beyond an experiencing that transcends the physical realm.
So it's about tuning into a different frequency,
Yes.
listening with the heart, with the soul,
Yeah.
rather than just with our physical ears.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a different kind of listening.
Okay.
A listening that is more about feeling and intuition
Mm-hmm.
than simply hearing.
Right.
It makes me think of those moments
Yeah.
when we witness something so breathtakingly beautiful,
Okay.
a sunset,
Mm-hmm.
a starry night sky,
Yeah.
a piece of music that moves us to tears,
Right.
that we feel a sense of awe and wonder that words can't quite capture.
It's like we're tapping into something larger than ourselves.
Yes.
A deeper reality that's always present,
Mm-hmm.
but that we often miss because we're caught up in the noise and distractions of daily life.
We get distracted.
Kabir's inviting us to
Yes.
cultivate that awareness,
Mm.
to practice that kind of listening
Yes.
in every moment,
In every moment.
to listen for the music of the spheres, as he calls it,
Right.
the rhythm of the cosmos,
Mm-hmm.
the heartbeat of the divine that's pulsating within us and all of creation.
Beautiful.
So it's not just about reading his poetry.
It's not.
It's about embodying its message,
It is.
about living with that open-hearted awareness,
Yeah.
that willingness to listen for that.
That willingness to listen for that subtle music that's always playing beneath the surface of things.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place for us to maybe transition
Okay.
to thinking about what it means to actually practice
Right.
that kind of listening in our lives.
Right.
You know, because I think a lot of people can relate to the experience
Mm.
of feeling that sense of awe and wonder
Yeah.
when they encounter something beautiful in nature,
Right.
or when they hear a piece of music that moves them.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we take that experience
Yeah.
and integrate it into our everyday lives?
I think that's the real challenge, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's so easy to get caught up in the
Right.
busyness and the distractions of daily life.
Yeah, the to-do lists,
The to-do list, the emails.
all of that.
All of that.
So how do we cultivate that sense of presence
Right.
and openness
Yeah.
that allows us to really hear that music?
I think one of the keys is to start by recognizing that it's a practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
something that just happens automatically. It's
Yeah.
something that we need to cultivate intentionally.
And that might involve setting aside time for silence and solitude.
It might.
Maybe it's through meditation
Mm-hmm.
or spending time in nature,
Yeah.
or even just taking a few moments each day
Right.
to really listen to the sounds around us
To really pay attention
without judgment,
without judgment.
without trying to label or categorize them.
Exactly. Just allowing ourselves to be present
Yeah.
to what is.
And I think that's where Kabir's poetry can be really helpful,
I think so too.
because it reminds us that the divine isn't separate from the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's woven into the fabric of our everyday experience.
It's all around us.
So if we can cultivate that kind of attentiveness,
Yeah.
that openness to the present moment,
Right.
then we might start to hear that music
We might.
Even in the midst of the chaos.
Even in the midst of the chaos.
So maybe it's about finding those moments of stillness within the movement of life.
Within the movement of life, yeah.
And allowing ourselves to be touched
right.
by the beauty that's always present. If we just open our eyes.
If we just open our eyes and our hearts.
And our ears.
And our ears.
Exactly.
And maybe even our skin.
Our skin, yeah.
To feel the world around us.
It's about engaging all of our senses.
It is.
In this process of awakening.
I love that. Engaging all of our senses in this process of awakening.
And I think that's a really beautiful way to think about Kabir's message. Because it's not just about intellectual understanding.
No, it's not.
It's about embodiment.
Embodiment, yes.
It's about bringing those spiritual insights into the lived reality.
Into our body.
Of our everyday lives.
Into the world.
Into the world.
Yeah.
Now, before we completely wrap up our time with Kabir.
Okay.
I wanted to get your thoughts. On something he was very vocal about.
Okay.
And that's his critique of organized religion.
Right.
It seems like he was walking a fine line.
Yeah.
Promoting a spiritual path.
Right.
While also being critical of institutions.
Yeah.
That often claim to offer that path.
He was a bit of a rebel.
Yeah. What do you make of that tension in his work?
I think it's a really important tension.
Okay.
And one that's still relevant for us today. Because on the one hand, we have this human need for belonging, for community, and for a sense of shared meaning and purpose. And religious institutions can provide that.
They can.
But on the other hand, there's always the danger of dogma, of blind faith, of getting so caught up in the rules and rituals that we lose sight of the essence.
The heart of it.
Of what spirituality is really about.
Exactly. And I think that's where Kabir's critique comes in.
I think so too.
He's not saying that all organized religion is bad.
Right.
But he's urging us to be discerning.
To be discerning, yeah.
To not blindly accept what we're told.
Right.
But to question. To seek our own truth.
And to find the practices that genuinely nourish our souls.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance.
It's about finding that balance.
Between tradition and individual exploration.
Exactly.
Between the outer forms of religion and the inner experience of the divine.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And it's not always an easy balance to find.
No, it's not.
But I think it's a journey worth taking.
I think so too.
And one that Kabir's poetry can guide us on.
Subtle music that's always playing beneath the surface of things.
Right. And I think that's a good place for us to maybe transition to thinking about what it means to actually practice that kind of listening in our lives. You know, because I think a lot of people can relate to the experience of feeling that sense of awe and wonder when they encounter something beautiful in nature or when they hear a piece of music that moves them. But how do we take that experience and integrate it into our everyday lives?
I think that's the real challenge, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the busyness and the distractions of daily life.
Yeah, the to-do lists. And
the to-do list, the emails.
All of that.
All of that.
So how do we cultivate that sense of presence and openness that allows us to really hear that music?
I think one of the keys is to start by recognizing that it's a practice. It's not something that just happens automatically. It's something that we need to cultivate intentionally.
And that might involve setting aside time for silence and solitude.
It might.
Maybe it's through meditation or spending time in nature or even just taking a few moments each day to really listen to the sounds around us.
Really pay attention. Without judgment.
Without judgment.
Without trying to label or categorize them.
Exactly. Just allowing ourselves to be present to what is.
And I think that's where Kabir's poetry can be really helpful.
I think so too.
Because it reminds us that the divine isn't separate from the world. It's woven into the fabric of our everyday experience.
It's all around us.
So if we can cultivate that kind of attentiveness, that openness to the present moment, then we might start to hear that music.
We might.
Even in the midst of the chaos.
Even in the midst of the chaos.
So maybe it's about finding those moments of stillness within the movement of life.
Within the movement of life,
And allowing ourselves to be touched by the beauty that's always present. If we just open our eyes.
If we just open our eyes and our hearts.
And our ears.
And our ears.
Exactly.
And maybe even our skin.
And our skin,
to feel the world around us.
It's about engaging all of our senses.
It is.
In this process of awakening. I love that engaging all of our senses in this process of awakening.
And I think that's a really beautiful way.
To
think about Kabir's message. Because it's not just about intellectual understanding.
No, it's not.
It's about embodiment.
Embodiment, yes.
It's about bringing those spiritual insights
Yeah.
into the lived reality
Into our bodies.
of our everyday lives,
Into the world.
into the world.
Yeah.
Now, before we completely wrap up our time with Kabir,
Okay.
I wanted to get your thoughts on something he was very vocal about,
Okay.
and that's his critique of organized religion.
Right.
It seems like he was walking a fine line, promoting a spiritual path,
Right.
while also being critical of institutions
Yeah.
that often claim to offer that path.
He was a bit of a rebel.
Yeah. What do you make of that tension in his work?
I think it's a really important tension and one that's still relevant for us today because on the one hand, we have this human need for belonging,
Oh.
for community, for a sense of shared meaning and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And religious institutions can provide that.
They can.
But on the other hand, there's always the danger
Right.
of dogma,
Mhm.
of blind faith,
Right.
of getting so caught up in the rules and rituals
Yeah.
that we lose sight of the essence
The heart of it.
of what spirituality is really about.
Exactly. And I think that's where Kabir's critique comes in.
I think so too.
He's not saying that all organized religion is bad,
Right.
but he's urging us to be discerning,
To be discerning, yeah.
to not blindly accept what we're told,
Right.
but to question,
Mm-hmm.
to seek our own truth.
And to find the practices
Mm-hmm.
that genuinely nourish our souls.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance
It's about finding that balance.
between tradition and individual explorations,
Exactly.
between the outer forms of religion
Mhm.
and the inner experience of the divine.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And it's not always an easy balance to find,
No, it's not.
but I think it's a journey worth taking,
I think so too.
and one that Kabir's poetry can guide us on. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Kabir.
I agree.
But even though our conversation is ending, his poetry continues to offer us a path for exploration, a way to connect with something larger than ourselves, something that transcends time and place. So as we go back to our everyday lives, let's carry that sense of wonder with us, that openness to the divine spark that resides within each of us. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep listening for that unstruck music. You never know where it might lead you.
Beautiful.